Hello, everyone. Good evening. I mean, if you're in Nigeria, obviously it's an evening. To other audiences across the world, we say good morning or good afternoon to you. It's great to have you all today again for another session of our discussion as we do at the Girls for Leadership Initiative. We're super excited to be talking about, the post-election events. Um, and yes, today we have a guest who is going to be speaking to this. So I guess he actually was an official INEC observer during the 2023 presidential and National Assembly elections. So he has like first-hand experiences how the election went and etc. So we're going to be hearing from the horse's mouth today. But before then, before we kick off the conversation, allow me to briefly introduce you to what we do at the Girls for Leadership Initiative, like we normally do. My name again is Kende. The Girls for Leadership Initiative is a non-governmental organization. We're based in Nigeria, and our vision is to inspire a generation of young female leaders. Our thematic area is building women and girls who can take up leadership position, and we do this using several program and project initiatives which are tailored around addressing issues that necessarily hinder women and girls from stirring up leadership position and being who they want to be and what they want to be. um Permit me to also introduce you to special guests that we have, or rather my co-hosts. I have some co-hosts from the Girls for Leadership Initiative team. I have Fuad Badru. Welcome, Fuad Badru. I also have with me Temi Tokpe Belo, who is also going to be sharing with us. I'll be asking our speaker some exciting questions that would propel our analysis of the um, 2023 presidential and National Assembly elections. Okay, welcome, OBJ, as we fondly call him. His name is OBJ. You're welcome, OBJ. Say hello to the
Thank you.
audience. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, hello everyone, and how is
How are
everyone
you
doing?
doing today?
I'm good, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Oh, that's good to hear. We can hear you, OBJ. We can certainly do. Thank you
Okay.
for honoring an invitation. We are super excited to kick off this conversation with you and to get insights from you pertaining the concluded National Assembly elections and the presidential election. Of course, we've seen the results and everything out there. So, permit me to quickly give you a little rundown to who OBJ is, who Obasanjo Fajemirokun is. Obasanjo Fajemirokun is a social entrepreneur. He has over 7 years of experience working at intersection of providing access to quality education for children and for girls. OBJ, as we fondly call him, is the founder of the Brace Up the Young and We App. Perhaps he's going to give us little insight about all of this as the conversation go on. But most importantly to this conversation, OBJ was um, an INEC official observer for the 2023 presidential and national elections held in Nigeria on the 25th of February 2023. Welcome again, OBJ, and thank you for joining us today to speak to the analysis of what went on during the 2023 presidential elections. So
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna ask you one question right now, and afterwards, I think my other co-hosts will take the honor of like asking you more of the questions. I just want to understand how you feel the presidential election and the national election went on. I mean, what was your experience as a field marshal, if I say, observing the elections? Was there any intimidation to you as an individual observing the elections?
Okay, thank you so much. I know a lot of controversies have trailed the results and announcements. But prior to that, I was on field, particularly in Ogun State, observing the elections in Ottawa 3, which is the ward of the deputy governor of Ogun State. And part of the three polling units I observed, election went on smoothly, and a lot of things happened during then. When I mean a lot of things, I'm not saying the negative stuffs that happened, but unlike previous elections, and when I say previous elections, I've been a polling unit officer in previous elections, so it was not business as usual. This time, what I noticed was the voters were more sensitized. They knew what they want this time, and they came specifically for who they wanted to vote for, irrespective of any inducement or harassment. And most of the polling units I observed, a lot of those stuff did not occur due to the Naira redesign policy. We noticed that there was low vote buying occurrence across Nigeria. So there was no even cash flow for you to even use to even say you want to even buy voters on field. Although, yes, there are still cases where it occurred, as reported by EFCC and ICPC. But in the polling unit where I observed, vote buying was to the lowest. Election went on well, but sadly, like I normally say, we also see we're faced with low voter turnout, and this has been a major problem facing Nigerian elections over and over again, where we have, like, in one of the polling units I observed, there were 1,300 plus voters, accredited voters in that unit. The polling unit recorded at the end of the voting period 139 voters. So if you compare the statistics between 1,300 plus and 139 that came out to perform their voting rights, you could notice that there's still an issue of low voters turnout. Aside that, the beavers functioned very well in accrediting most of the voters in the polling units I observed. However, we have a lot of discussions concerning the IREV, because I, as an observer, I did ask the polling unit officer in the polling unit I observed, the particularly the two, to upload the results, and they came up with excuses such as no network, Beavers was malfunctioning, and this Beavers was perfectly well throughout the entire period. But since the party agents, we were present, particularly we had two party agents present in the three polling units I observed, which was the APC and the PDP party agents. Since they accepted that the coalition officer could give them the manual results and close the polling unit, I, as an observer, I had nothing to do than ask questions. And part of also what I observed was how the Electoral Act, which was signed by the former president of still existing president Muhammadu Buhari, regarding people with disabilities performing or voting during electoral processes. And I was particularly focused on observing that due to my work with We App, and also as I was an accredited voter on the Albino Foundation. And I noticed that polling unit officers this time were trained to give preferences and privileges to people with disabilities when they arrive at the polling unit according to the Electoral Act, and also give respect to the age and the older population, because they have a different line when they queue for voting, to make the process faster for them come to the youth who are on a different line. So I think this summarized the little observation I had on that day. And so as the question goes on, I can be able to give more details.
It's so super interesting to hear. I mean, a summary of what you observed. Particularly, these are points that would be making references to in the course of the conversation, like to determine how free and fair the election process was, and particularly since a winner has been declared for the presidential elections, and so we also have like declared winners for the House of Representatives and etc. The National Assembly to say. And so, and we know that there existing sort of like issues that are still, ongoing, to make reference to how INEC staff or HADOC members, sort of conducted or collated the results. I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Fuad to ask some questions that I know that is boiling to also ask you around all of these issues. Over to you, Fuad.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Obasanjo. Sorry to ask, is Obasanjo your name or Faje Miroku? Sorry, which of them is
No,
the name? Sorry.
Obasanjo is my name. Obasanjo.
Oh, okay, okay. Hope you are not like the old Obasanjo we have. So that's by the way, actually. So it's nice having you on the space to this evening tonight, and following up on the discussion you've had with executive director. It's been nice having you on the space. So very quickly, before I allow other hosts as well ask you some questions, I have quite a few questions to ask you, and I want you to be honest, like real honest with the response you are going to be giving, because you were an observer of the election, and there've been a lot of things flying online, steering online based on party and emotion. So I just want to ask you some questions so that you can clarify, because we are actually non-partisan in this particular organization. So the first question would be, as an election observer, what are those things you noticed that were not right? We have a lot of things: the beavers issue, the issue of low turnout, the issue of people fighting each other, the issue of buying votes, the issue of people trying to disrupt the election. So, what are those things you believe were not right that happened actually at the polling unit you observed?
Okay, thank you so much. So what I feel was not right. First of all, I'll start from the IRF. The IRF failed us. That is the first thing I would say was not right. As an observer, I was expecting the IRF to be giving me live data of polling unit results as it was going. But up till now, according to the last watching the vote Yaga email I received, there are only 76% of polling unit results on the IRF, even as of today, as of this morning when I received the email. So IRF failed us. Yes, we had the issue of low voter turnout. Low voter turnout is still a major issue in Nigeria. I'm still waiting for the final data to be released on how many people voted and the percentages, and which I think INEC has released, but we are still working on getting the final percentages of how many voted. But the last one I was calculating, I'm still seeing between 30 to 35% of registered voters that participated during the election, which this is not confirmed, quote and unquote. So low voter turnout is still a major problem. And I could say that even though this can be challenged, I could say most of the polling unit officers were not well equipped with what they would face online, on site. Sorry, during that day, a lot of them were having issues with crowd control, where we had overpopulated polling units, and some of them were pressured. INEC had the issue of in my polling unit, particularly in Ottawa Tree, INEC did not pay the what they call, is it their feeding allowance, they pay them that money, so they had to delay coming to the polling unit. We were there from, I was there before 8. The people, I think they arrived at to 10, and they were right. The
Wow.
collation center for Ward 3 was right in St. Michael, the school where I observed. We had 3 polling units there. The entire polling units did not start voting till around past 10 to 11. Why? Because
Wow.
INEC did not release their inconvenience fee, or is it their feeding allowance that morning? Only the NYC polling unit officers were paid. The APOs, which are local residents and all that, were not paid. So they refused out. They received, which was part of what slowed the results and the election process in Ottawa Tree on that day. And this was really an issue because by the time the polling unit officers, the APOs, and the ad hoc staff came out, they were already tensed. They were pressured by the agitation fight for their feeding allowance, now coming to face voters who were already annoyed and aggravated because they have stayed for hours, over 1 hour, waiting to be accredited and to vote. So I could say the ad hoc staff were not really prepared, in quote and unquote, for what they faced on site. Also, part of things that did not go on, I could say some of the polling units were still on high ground, which was particularly for people with disability. They had challenges accessing high ground. So we still had challenges to access the high ground, visually impaired because those polling units were underground, and this was against the Electoral Act was signed to support, particularly people with disabilities. There was a clause for people with disability to have access to the polling units and break all these barriers. Also, what did not go well, late starting of election, voting across Nigeria, not just my polling unit. We recorded it across Nigeria. I think the last data I saw, I think we only had about 25% of polling units that kicked off by 8:30. The rest started late. We had some polling units in Lagos from feedback we have seen online and from fellow observers that started as much as 12. Some even started past 3. So low opening of polling units was also a major problem. Yes, I think these are the basic things I saw that did not work out for now.
Okay, thank you very much for your opinion, and thank you very much for being as honest as possible. So, going forward, you said something about one of the issues that was faced was the low turnout of voters. What would you ascribe to the reason as to why the voters were not coming out? Would you say it was because they do not have like a how will I put it, they do not have interest in politics, or they do not feel like it's worth it for them to come out, or even at the polling station or the polling centers the ad hoc staff were not professional with their work? What would you ascribe to the low turnout based on what you observed during the last election and this particular election?
Okay, thank you so much. So, concerning the low voter turnout, as someone who is involved in sensitization, I did PVC drive, I did election campaign and mobilization of voters to encourage them to come out and vote, particularly focusing on youth and disability. I can tell you the voter turnout is still regarding the trust in our electoral process. A lot of people find it hard in Nigeria, or a larger percentage of those not voting find it hard in Nigeria to believe that their vote counts. And this is a major challenge. It's a major challenge, not because of the data we'll be seeing low voters turnout, the data we'll be ascribing to, but because even performance of the IREV. The IREV was to be trust for those who voted to show that their votes counted. Because when we are doing PV5 and you even say, oh, it doesn't matter whether I or not, they will still win. Don't care that I participate, my vote doesn't count. So right now, when people have and the whole election is becoming more contestable than even when it was even announced, and a lot of that's gone to say that, oh, they are not seeing the result. So people who don't want to come out to vote on, they, I could say, although not proved by data, that I don't want to call it voter apathy, but because of lack of trust in the electoral process. So we have a large number of citizens that don't believe that vote counts. You definitely have a number of citizens who is their permanent voters ID that go out and form their civic rights. So I feel this is a major challenge restricting voters turnout, aside all other challenges such as electoral violence and all others that can be also be ascribed to it. But a major part of it is that most voters who did not come out believes that their vote will not count.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Obasanjo. Like we would always say, there is no problem that does not have solution. So, what is your own, based on your work as an observer, what would you say is the solution to low voters turnout? What would you say from your perspective?
Okay, from my own perspective, I could say yes, a lot around sensitization, which are being done by CSOs. INEC is trying their best, and we could see more improvement from them. And aside that, transparency in the electoral process is very, very important. This is what the IREV will have proved before it became even more contestable concerning all results. So, what voters want to see is that as I voted, I can go online and see my vote count. They want to see it count. That is what voters. Once you can tell people that, oh, if 100 comes to vote here, what you vote will be put, or you can view it from any part of the world, it will definitely increase large voters turnout. I can tell you for a fact that the gubernatorial election in Lagos, we see an high voters turnout come March 11. because of the change in the results that came out, people now believe that yes, since they came out to vote in mass, a different party won the ruling party. They now believe that now they can change the sitting governor. And this is not coming as a mistake. This is coming because they now believe that yes, if they come out and vote in mass, their results will show. So if this can be ascribed to every other state in Nigeria, if this can be showed by INEC generally, majorly by transparency, which is we were open as civil society organization to see the IREV work out, so that you who are not in the country or you are in the country, you can view the result from any part of the world and see the numbers fluctuating as it's going up and down according to how results are coming in. So the electoral umpires, which are INEC, must show transparency in their stuff. And please don't ask me if they are transparent or not. Let's not go to that
No, 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 I'm not asking.
aspect. But yeah, well, yes, to increase voter turnout, believe me, we need to show transparency. Aside that, also a lot of sensitization needs to be carried out. A lot of sensitization, and I believe so much that the educated literate in Nigeria needs to come out and vote. Needs to come. I can tell you that 50% or even up to 70% of those in the three polling units I observed were the same market women who had no access to Twitter, the same aged men who were listening to radios, and yet you see 1001 tweets trending that day, number one in Africa of the election results. But where were they? Were they
Yes.
voting? Were they at their polling units? So a lot of stuff needs to come out. School, universities need to start speaking to their students. Workplaces need to start encouraging workers to go and perform their civic duties by voting, because the educated literate needs to start voting in Nigeria. The educated ones particularly. We have stepped into, so Twitter is helping us share our voices, but we still need to come out to vote, because like the popular saying, results are not counted on Twitter and you cannot vote on Twitter. So if this tree can be worked on in terms of high level of sensitization, transparency in extra processes, and also sensitization the educated Nigerians perform their civic and truth, voter turnout will increase drastically.
Okay, and thank you so much, Mr. Obasanjo. So, very quickly, before I round up and pass the baton to Miss Kenny, would you say, like holistically, that this election has been free and fair? I know it's a
This
tricky
question you
question.
are
I'm
asking,
just trying to.
will I say the election is free and fair? I
Based on
will
your
not give you a yes or
perspective,
no
just
answer.
your opinion. Okay.
So I will not give you a yes or no answer, but I will come from the fact where I work. So particularly
Okay.
one, I believe for election to be free and it must be inclusive. So now is how inclusive is the last presidential election. Secondly, it must be transparent. How transparent was the results? How transparent was the process? How transparent was everybody, including security agencies that were involved in this process? If an election becomes inclusive and transparent, then we can say it is free and fair. But it is not in my power to determine if the election is free and fair. However, from the three polling units I observed, the election was
Okay.
actually fair. From the three polling units, voting went on well. We had adequate security, and results were recorded on the spot. Counting was transparent. Beavers did not malfunction in any of these three polling units. So at least they cancelled out the issue of overvoting. Overvoting was totally ruled out, which was what was part of the problems the election tribunals and the court has to determine after most election previously in Nigeria. But however, if you now look at post-election, what happened to the results? Where the result transmitted. So the IREF is the one that is making it contestable for me to answer if the elections was free and fair. But to a
Oh,
larger percentage, I will say yes, that the election was free and fair. For me to give it 100% free and fair, I will need the IRF to have worked. But to a larger
okay.
percentage, it was.
Okay, thank you very much. So that would bring me to my last question before I finally go. Sorry, my question are kind of tricky. I just want to get honest opinions based on what we've seen on Twitter, what we've seen on Instagram, and the likes. Currently, social media is going crazy with all these things, and for you to actually get facts, you must be able to ask someone that know that experienced something like this. Because my own polling unit where I voted, let's be honest, Labour Party flooded everywhere, and to me, it's just a testament that people are actually coming out to vote, and people their vote actually counts. As against what we normally say before that, okay, they will rig it. This is going to be rigged. So now all parties currently are even scared. Nobody is sure that one party is going to come in or not. So thank you very much. So lastly, from what you've observed, would you say that vote buying has reduced, even with the current Naira policy issue? Would you say it has reduced drastically?
Yes, I would say yes.
Okay.
Believe me, before the elections, I did not support the CBN Naira redesign because it did not change our dollar to Naira rates and all of that stuff. But during the election day, as a past polling unit officer, I've seen where we had vote buying live on the spot in electoral places while observing as a normal voter and as a polling unit officer. But during this time, even the people that wanted to buy vote did not have cash at hand. There was no cash to even buy votes. So it was very hard for vote buying to take place. Yes, ICPC and EFCC came out with reports of agents had account numbers written on some papers where they promised to pay them money to vote. However, from people I interacted with after I came with, I made some calls to people. Oh, one of my friends actually attested that yes, his account number written. He never saw any cash till today, even though it was missed. So yes, to a large extent, vote buying reduced because there was no even in circulation to even distribute it. There was no cash even in circulation. So vote buying reduced to a very large extent, but it was not totally eliminated due to the fact that ICPC and EFCC came out and said they were doing transfers. Some voters in some parts of Nigeria said they received transfer. A particular voter or tweet we saw online said they were sharing $100 bill for you to vote in a state in Nigeria, quote and unquote, which we can't prove or not. But to a large extent, vote buying was reduced to a large extent due to the naira redesign and low circulation of currencies or raw cash in circulation.
Okay. Thank you very much for your opinion. We really appreciate it. So over to you, Kenny.
Thank you, Fuad. Thank you, Obasanjo. That's a very interesting one to learn about. Before I pass on to
You're muted.
Temitope, who is going to. Can you hear me now?
Okay, you're back.
Yeah. Before I pass
Yes.
on to Temitope, who is going to ask you other, thought-provoking questions, about how the election went by. I'm just so curious to know about women's turnout, particularly young women, because from your discussion or submission earlier on, you mentioned how you noticed or observed market women who are most likely in the older age group were very they actually were in large numbers at the polling units you observed. What would you say about the younger women group? So, did you at all notice in large numbers they coming to vote as well as older women did?
Okay. Thank you. Yes. So I think there was a large increase in women's participation in performing their civic rights in the just concluded election. In Ogun State, we saw an increase in women participating actively. Not just older women, even the young ones were really interested in participating. I could hear an older woman or woman per se, a market woman continuously saying in the polling unit I observed that she was voting for the future of her children. She was voting for the future of her children. And this made me know that yes, they were becoming more interested in the electoral process. And aside the ones, to a large extent, I think INEC engaged polling unit officers were more females than male. Even from the videos you are seeing online, from pictures you are seeing, most polling unit officers I've seen were women. And this was a very positive stuff, especially for my organization, knowing that leadership responsibilities were being put to women to uphold. Most times, polling unit officers were always given to male. Even the time I participated in the previous election, they will say that, oh, they want to prioritize giving polling unit officer to a male copper and a female APO, because they believe that the polling unit might get rowdy, and a male needs to bring up his masculine nature and control. This time, the three polling units in where I observed were all mounted by women. In short, in my polling unit, we had 4 ad hoc staffs, 3 were women, young women. 3 of them were coppers, the PO, copper, PO. Then we had one guy, which was the male. So I feel not just the voters alone, but INEC this time and NYC in collaboration with INEC were able to trust female coppers with taking up leadership responsibility of becoming polling unit officers. And you can even confirm that by pictures you have seen online, videos you have seen online to show you when they were counting. Most you will see women involved with their NYC khakis, involved in the counting process, which shows that there was a large involvement of women as ad hoc staff this time. And this is very, very positive, even aside the voters. Yes, the voters, we still have to wait for final figures to show if we have a higher increase from last 4 years election to now. But from my own observation, I could see that women were more interested in participating, even more than the male counterpart this time.
Thank you for that submission. It's so interesting to hear that women's energy towards the
You're muted.
past presidential election was very renowned and noticeable, like we've always seen in time past. Like women are usually occupying a large percentage of the voters when we take a good look at the statistics. All right, thank you again for those submissions. Temitope, over to you. You have the floor now to ask your thought-provoking questions. Hi, Temitope, can you hear us? Hello? Okay, I'm not sure Temitope is right here, or she can hear us. Um, okay. All right. I think I'll just go on with my question on behalf of Temitope. So, Obasanjo, I'm super interested in knowing the status quo when it comes to voters intimidation. We saw violence play out at some part of the country. When you talk about Lagos State in particular, in Surulere, we saw on news, we saw on social media platforms how there was box snatching and etc., and then the attack on some innocent voters. So, what would you say was the case scenario for polling units you observed? Were there any form of intimidations whatsoever or violence, either explicitly shown or otherwise, in those places that you covered?
Yeah, okay, so thank you. So no, in places I covered there were no voter intimidation, no violence. And as the vote not fight coordinator for Ogun State, I was particularly watching out for any violence trigger or occurrence. And I can tell you that Ogun State as a whole during the last election did not, as of now, I've not seen any record of violence in Ogun State as a whole. Yeah, we have seen Lagos State, particularly to relay Aja, its local government popularly, and where we have voter intimidation and oppression, I popularly call it, and so violence being tried. And sadly, this is what we want in this election, and it is even painful to find that a particular governor even intimidated voters to vote for a particular party, we drastically reduced the voters out. The state, particularly if I'm wrong, I think Cross State, which voter turnout in that state very, very low number compared to how they normally come out to vote in mass. And so for Ogun State, there was no voter turnout, but I could say there was no voter intimidation, no violence. People were allowed to perform their civic rights. But I could say in Lagos State, I just, from reporting on news, it's difficult to see happening, and The question that came to mind is what were the security officials doing? Because in Ogun State, in Ota, which is Adodota, the biggest local government, there were so many security operatives moving around. Normally, the Electoral Act says they are not supposed to be armed. Those are the pulling unit, but we have those remotely moving with three vehicles. We have the military moving with three vehicles, fully armed, checking for any disturbance across. And we also have police vehicles moving fully armed aside the ESCC and the rest which were moving around to ensure that there was no voter intimidation or violence in any unit. So I will commend security officials in part of the country or most part of the country where we recorded no case of violence or voter intimidation. However, in places like Lagos, is a Cross River, Port Harcourt, and all those places where we record voter intimidation and even terrorist attack, as we could record in Maiduguri and some part of the deep northern part of Nigeria. I would say we need to ask questions about what were the triggers, what happened, and how can we really curb this, because voter intimidation is also part of what affects low voters turnout. If a voter believe he could be suppressed, his opinion could be suppressed, or he could be threatened or put under duress to vote for who or any party they don't want to vote for, it becomes a major problem to our democracy.
Very well said, Obasanjo. Very well said. What makes for a credible election is one that is free of violence and that allows people to exercise their franchise in safe environments without any form of intimidation. Another question that I really would want to put across to you at this point is to get your honest opinion about what you think the INEC should do about places where elections were cancelled, or there were violence, they were delay. Like, what should would be your thought around best way for the INEC, as an independent system who wants to uphold what the people really want to boil out at the end of the day? What would you have expected them to do in those case scenarios? We know of places where they had to have elections until the next day because of some issues. But aside that, what would you advise, or what would you prefer that the INEC does in those poll units, or what?
Okay, so what will I say the INEC? What will I advise? Okay, so before I could advise, I would just have to speak generally, because in most of those polling units, we still have to wait for INEC to give us why this election result were cancelled, aside just the state coalition officers and the scope, which came back to report over voting or violence in these areas. For violence, I would advise that INEC needs to interact with the Nigerian military and the police force to bring out special response squad during election period. So if you heard of places, let's say take an example of Surulere, and there was report of violence, and there were INEC officials reporting violence to their head office, there should be a special squad that can be dispatched to this troubled area to settle it down, because we know most of the police officers, most of the military were engaged on site in different parts of the country, but there should be a special response squad to most of these violence areas. And with the data INEC has gotten, I'm sure they have what they call the hotspot areas, where they will be triggering watching out for the next election in March 11 in these various states, particularly areas where violence took place in the last presidential election. So setting up a special response squad which will be on duty to respond to any form of thuggery, voter intimidation, or voter oppression in any polling unit. This is something they need to sit down and really think about negotiating with security agents, because remember, INEC is not a security agent. They are just umpires of the election. So we could get a security agent to man those places, particularly with AV security. Secondly, in the terms of um, what do they call it? Overvoting, which I think INEC has already solved. This was what Beavers was solving. So overvoting comes in when the numbers of accredited voters is less than the number of voters. So let's say in this polling unit we had 250 votes, but Beavers only accredited 99. That is overvoting. Now, the INEC scope, or the coalition officer or the returning officer in that state, has the power to either cancel that result or review the result. And so most of those places where it happened, election could be declared to run the next day if time permits, or at but part of most of the results were reported. Most of these polling units with this high level of voter overvoting were being cancelled, and this is why the beavers was introduced by INEC, and we saw the beavers move into action to solve this. But away from that, INEC can still try and do more in terms of, I feel they were not really responding and supporting their from yes, I know the state has been empowered to act, state chairman has been empowered, but you and I know in Nigeria, cases are not as straight as black and white. Something still has to be reported and you still have to give advice. So I hope INEC can advise states going further on quick decision making on most of these violence prone or overvoting sites. Other issues, I'm not sure there was any other issue from the result I listened to live from ICC. These are the two major issues where elections were cancelled in most of parts of the Nigeria, aside the terrorist attack. So the place for a terrorist attack is still the same thing with INEC needs to sit down, discuss with the Nigerian military, especially for the terrorism, and how they can ensure voting takes place in urban area, northeast and the northwestern part of Nigeria, to ensure that voters are not disenfranchised due to high level of terrorist activities in those areas.
Absolutely. I mean, what makes for a democracy is that everyone's voice is, added to the general outcome, and not just a section or group of person, being the champions of the results or the outcome of the day, and no one is disenfranchised. Well said, Obasanjo. I think on the final note before we call it a day is to, give a leap into what could eventually happen come 11th of March, which is for the governorship elections that are going to take place across many states in Nigeria. So, in your honest opinions, how well can INEC prepare ahead of this, given all of these case scenarios, these events that has metamorphosed during the presidential and the National Assembly elections? How best do you think INEC can uphold, the people's trust? Can ensure that people now have trust in whatsoever process, coalition, and declaration of results thereafter that is going to see itself play out in the coming elections.
Yes, so I think INEC has gotten a lot of feedback from social media, online, and even party agents at ICC giving feedback. One thing INEC needs to work on is the IREF. We will be watching out. CSOs will be watching out. Nigerians will be watching. We want to know if where millions of naira was spent developing a website that could not transmit results. And this is even beyond just having pictures. I think it's up on Nigerians for INEC to give us an IRF portal that you need to snap picture and impute. No, the polling unit officers should be giving passwords, should be giving their login details to impute numbers, so that the center coalition center will be seeing this number change. Unless they can tell us that IREF can read numbers from the pictures which they snap and upload. And that's why most polling unit officers or some polling unit officers will upload selfies. It's result. INEC needs to beyond just now upload pictures. They need to also give this avenue to impute numbers and deal with the internet garbaging and out. On the internet, you don't put there what you can, what you put is what you need. So if that's put in, the system works well, automatically we'll see the number being added. We don't need to wait for INEC to come and show us an Excel sheet as they did the ICC. So I feel it was slap and it's still in Nigeria, but even our ports, both locally and internationally, don't use Excel sheets to pay flights. So why should INEC, a national body organizing the general presidential election in Nigeria, come to show us on the national TV, watched by AU observers, international observers, EU observers, and they bring up Excel sheets after spending over 355 billion? Doing what? So I feel they need to improve in their adaptation of technology before this March 11 election, because it will be more stiff. the competition is more. People have now noticed that if they come out in mass to vote, rigging is hard. So this time we are hoping to see a high voter turnout, and we are hoping to see displacement in many governors' seats. Many governors who were not working will be displaced because now the people are seeing their voice. So INEC needs to sit up because people will be more agitated when they vote and they hope the result will be read or seen on IREF, and they are seeing results and they are not seeing results. It will be a problem. Also, if I will add, INEC needs to close down the number of days it used to report or announce election results. We took 4 days to announce presidential results in the age of technology. Tech inclusion is necessary. We have people at Ikeja who can build sophisticated websites that could show a lot, and have built even sophisticated website that is capturing data across Nigeria. The NIN platform is capturing millions of data across Nigeria. So why can't INEC give us a platform that could help us announce results within 24 hours? We don't need to wait for what baffles me the most is why should a state coalition officer travel from Ogun State kilometers away to Abuja to go and read results when we have Zoom, we have Google Meet? If you feel this platform are not trusted, INEC will come up with their own video platforms. It could save travel time, the hours they used to go and spend on flights, whether it's chartered flights or executive flights, could have been saved to read results and make sure within 24 to 48 hours results are announced, because this causes tension and make um, misinformation being passed around on social media. And this builds on some crisis in some part of Lagos State. For Monday and Tuesday, most places in Lagos and Ogun State were shut down. Economic activity were grounded because they don't know what will happen since the results were not being read. So INEC should do better in how they release results. We need to release results within 24 to 48 hours. Technology is here to support. So INEC should do this. And please, INEC should ensure that voting starts by 8:30. They need to come early. This causes if polling units are not opened early, aggregation of voters don't start early, this causes a lot of factors. One, pressure on the ad hoc staffs. The voters already aggravated, they're already angry, they already feel like their vote will not count. So there's tension already in the air. It gives more work for the security personnel to calm down people. And voting will cross 2 p.m., which was the stipulated time for voting to end, between 2 to 2:30. We could see from social media and even in polling units I observed, one of the voters, one voting, they had to end voting by 5 p.m. in the evening. So compare the time 2:30 p.m. to past 5. As over hours voting. Some places in Lagos, voting were still taking place at 8 p.m. A particular place in Adola was observed by my friend from the same observation unit we were in. They were out to be counting their results with torchlights. They were counting results around past 8:10 p.m., past 8:09 p.m. So because of there was no light where it was a government school, they had to start owning their phone torchlights to count lights, to count votes, and couldn't be done. So INEC needs to ensure that their ad hoc staff come in early. They need to ensure early release of results to be able to assure voters that their votes count. It's when the result delays that voters now be scared, formation out election practice, voting now starts happening. Sensitization also needs to be done on the beavers and the IREF. INEC needs to come and clarify what they mean. We don't want the one that the INEC chairman is telling us something different at the ICC when he was asked about the IREF and what the beavers function was. He needs to give us a press conference between now and 11 to clarify what function of IREF in the forthcoming election. Are we expecting results on the IREF or not? Let's establish it. Aside just accreditation of voters by the beavers, what other function is the beavers dedicated to do? And clarification on the Electoral Act on the 24%, 24 states, 25%, 24 states. I still think that will still be a major contention in election. issue of or and those words where lawyers had to come and use long hours to explain. But sadly, we need the INEC chairman to come out plain. And so for the forthcoming election, security to be even tight because this now it was the last election about the president, this time about in our own state. So the pressure will be higher because we want to determine leaders in our own state. So there are a lot of interest, and when there are a lot of interest, there will be a lot of conflicts. So in order to reduce conflict, INEX needs to really, really act fast and put their house in order. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Obasanjo. That's a very long submission, but very critical um, to the upcoming 11th March governorship election. Among part of your submission was to ensure that INEC embrace technology in the collation and the declaration of the results across board. You also mentioned the security issue, which is very paramount. You talked about the time where INEC ad hoc staff needs to arrive at the polling unit to commence the election should be exactly what time that it is officially stipulated, which is 8:30 a.m. in the morning. You also made mention of yeah, I think those are pretty much the list list I forget. It's more about the provision of the 24 or 25 polling unit 25 sorry 24 or 25 states that must be won by
State
or that a candidate must have 25%,
100%.
as the ruling or the candidate to be declared winner, if my thoughts are well captured that way. I know Nigerians understand what I'm trying to say, and you also do understand what I'm trying to say. Sometimes we lose words to describe all of this. I think this is where we call the curtain. It's been an amazing time. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation. We hope and
Thank
we
you.
pray that come March 11th, this is going to be like a more progressive case scenarios for the elections, as um, much more better off than the presidential elections. Thank you again, Obasanjo. I also want to say shout out to everyone who has been watching us until now and who will also be streaming live later on. Thank you again. Be safe, embrace peace, and for any issues or grievances relating to the elections, I think the court of law has the final say. So let's maintain orderliness, let's maintain peace, and let's wait for the ruling of the law to take hold in due course. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.